This is the thing about AI. It does some really cool stuff, but they insist on claiming that it does generations ahead of what it actually can do. Cognition Labs people had claimed that Devin had actually done a freelance job off of a freelance website called UpWork, and it had not. Everybody was taking this claim at face value, and it was obviously not true.
What's up, guys? I'm Nobody Special, and I have a very special guest with me today. I've got Carl from the Internet of Bugs is with me. He's a relatively new channel, and he's blown up very quickly, and for good reason. Carl really knows his stuff. And a lot of my commentary around the AI mania has been centered around the business practices, the creative accounting, if you will, the round tripping, the shady backgrounds of some of these rock star CEOs. But I don't really have the technical background to be able to say whether or not this bubble is legit or is it really the next big thing. And this is where Carl's channel fits in so perfectly because, well, Carl, you do have that background. You've been a software developer for a long time. So welcome. Thank you for talking to us today. And if you could, Carl, could you tell us a little bit about your background, maybe some of the projects you've worked on over the years? And sure. I just love the backstory of your channel too. So where your channel came from, I think would be great as well.
So my degree's in physics from in the 90s, the very early 90s. My job I had while I was in college, when I was paying the bills, was working in the computer lab, fixing computers. And so when I got my degree in physics, I looked at how much debt I was in. I wanted to go to grad school because you can't really do anything with an undergrad in physics. I looked at how much debt I was in. I had an offer to go get a PhD. I looked at how much debt I was going to be in when I got done with my PhD program and went, I think I'll get a computer job for a little while and I'll pay off my student loans and then I'll save up some money and then I'll go get my degree. And that was 35 years ago. So I'm guessing that's not going to happen.
You're getting around to it, right?
Yeah. One of these years, maybe. So the year that I graduated from college and started as a computer consultant was the year that NCSA Mosaic was released, which was the first cross-platform web browser. So I've been doing this for 35 years, and my career has pretty much grown up with the web. And I used to connect people to the internet, which back when connecting people to the internet meant having a physical server and putting in a real router and getting a T1 to their location from the phone company and hooking up DNS and all that kind of stuff that at the moment you just do with a few clicks. So I've seen many, many changes over the years in the computing industry. I did a bunch of flying around the country, I never worked on Wall Street. I worked on Fulton Street, which is a couple of streets over from that. I had an office on Fulton Street for a while, did some time at Teachers Insurance, did some time at ING Bearing, did some time in Motorola in Chicago, did some time for Hughes Aerospace and Nestle and El Segundo, so kind of bounced all over the place. In 99, I caught the startup bug, built a company called NetSpend. I was the vice president of technical operations there. And we were basically a debit card issuer back when people were too afraid to use their real credit cards on the internet because encryption was still really, really early. I spent a year at Amazon. So I worked on the project where when the person comes up to your porch and puts the package down and takes the picture of the package and then drives away, the app on their phone, if it's an iPhone, I built the test suite and the state machine and the logic and the core functionality and the storage of that. So since some time at IBM's Cloud Group, I've kind of bounced around. So in January, I'm the father of a college freshman. And in January, she switched her major from environmental science to computer science and joined this computer club at the school where she goes. And the first meeting, I ended up picking her up. And she's like, oh, I told them that my dad was a computer programmer. And they had all these questions about, is AI going to take my job? Am I still going to have a job by the time I graduate? Because these are all, kids in college that are wondering, they're all computer science majors and they're all expecting to get a computer job in a few years. So I said, oh, okay, I can answer some of those questions. I know how to do this. I'll just go write a couple of blog posts and put them up and you can give them the URL. And she looked at me and said, Dad, no one my age will ever find or read your blog. And so we talked back and forth and I ended up starting a YouTube channel and I figured I would have as many subscribers as her computer club had members. And then I had a couple of videos. I had maybe a couple hundred subscribers. And then a group called Cognition Labs, I think, came out with a thing that they called the first AI software engineer. And I happened to have been working on a video already that day about the thing that AI can't do in software development primarily, which is it can't negotiate with people about what it is that they actually want and work out what the actual requirements are supposed to be and that kind of thing. It can only do basically what it's told, and it can't explain to you what's possible, right? So good software development is a negotiation between the person that wants the software written and the person that knows how to write it. And there's a conversation back and forth about, okay, well, I can do it this way instead of the way you want, and it'll be half as expensive. Is that good or not? And AI totally can't do that. So I just rolled this new AI first software engineer into that video, posted it that afternoon. And then the first couple of days that it was out with a big media blitz, if you Googled that or went to their video, the only other video on YouTube besides theirs was mine. So my channel went up by several thousand subscribers at that point, and it's just kind of been crazy ever since.
So that video actually was on the list of topics I wanted to talk about. So we're going to leapfrog around a little bit here,
right?
Because I saw that Devin video, and I saw the Cognition Labs video that they put out. Mm-hmm. And by the way, Cognition Labs used that video as marketing material to go out and solicit a $2 billion valuation. So it was used for sourcing finances. And then your video comes right out. And by the way, folks, I'm going to put a link to these videos we're talking about down in the description. And I highly recommend you check out Carl's channel and subscribe. And of course, tell him nobody sent you. So let's talk about that Devin video that blew up your channel. It was called Debunking Devin, the first AI software engineer, UpWork lie exposed. Could you tell a little bit about like what Devin is? What are they purporting it to be? And why you think it's being overhyped and oversold? Because I'll be honest with you, as a relatively uninitiated in AI tech and software development, if I had just watched that Cognition Labs video, I would have said, this thing is amazing. This is $1 billion company. But you really put some cold water on some of those grand promises and statements that they were making.
Well, I mean, so I will say it is amazing, right? It's if you'd told me a couple of years ago that we would be able to do what it actually can do at the moment, I would have been surprised. But it's very, very far. This is the thing about AI is it does some really cool stuff, but they insist on claiming that it does generations ahead of what it actually can do. And this is the problem. So the Devin video that really, really blew my channel up was 3 weeks after the Devin launch. And it was my second real Devin video. And basically, the Cognition Labs people had claimed that Devin had actually done a freelance job off of a freelance website called UpWork. And it had not. And after about 3 weeks, I couldn't stand it anymore because everybody was taking this claim at face value, and it was obviously not true. But nobody ever went and looked past the headline, and then a bunch of influencers and journalists like took that claim and turned it into, AI can already do the job of a software developer. It's going to be doing a bunch of other stuff. So I was like, okay, fine. This is what the job claimed. This is what the job required you to do, but this is the bit that it actually did. And if you actually wanted to do what the job required, you'd have to do all of this other stuff too. And then, by the way, of the stuff that it did do, which is a subset of what it was supposed to do, it did a pretty crappy job. And it spent 6 hours doing it, and it took me about 35 minutes, and the job I did ended up being a lot better. And
now,
so,
if I could pause you for a second, there was actually one part in the video that really stuck out at me. In the Cognition video, where they were claiming it had done this freelance work on UpWork, which again was just a false claim, right?
Right.
They're suggesting as if the AI is already out there earning a couple of bucks on this software programming freelance site. It's not. But there was an error, and they're saying, look, here's Devin going back and debugging the code and troubleshooting just like a real person. And then you did something most people wouldn't do to expose just how silly that really was, because you actually opened up the hood and looked, right?
Right.
So what was that error, and what caused it, and why would a person not do that?
Right. So there are a couple things. So basically, it had created a file that it didn't need to create. That was a configuration file that was and it was trying to read this configuration file using a program that it wrote that it didn't need to write, because the stuff that it was doing, the repository that it was trying to work with already had all that stuff built in. So it's building stuff its own way, and it's trying to read this thing in. And what it's trying to do, it's called parsing a JSON file. You can Google it if it matters. But basically, the way it was trying to read this file in is the way we would have read it in 15 years ago. But it was grabbing a block and pulling one block in and then figuring out where the block stopped and then parsing that block and then grabbing the next block. But the language it was writing in, which is called Python, which is a modern language, there's a one-liner that says, dump this JSON file into an object. Right. So it was going way out of its way to do this the really hard way. And it turns out that the really hard way, when it was trying to do it that way, it had bugs. So they were showing it fixing its own code that it had written to try to do a thing the hard way in the much slower, much more inefficient way than any normal programmer would have done it these days. And if a junior programmer had come to me and said, okay, I'm going to do it this way, I would have been like, why? There's a one line, just do it this. So it did a really roundabout, really poor job, created a bunch of bugs, fixed its own bugs, and got credit from the folks that looked at it for being able to find bugs in somebody else's software and fix them.
So I think, and that last part there really nailed it, and it kind of exposes just how disingenuous some of the, I'm going to say it, marketing of AI is, right? Because this video was essentially marketing material to investors because they used it to raise their $2 billion valuation. Devin made a mistake. It was a rookie mistake that even a rookie wouldn't have made. There was a much easier way to do things. And then Devin went and fixed its own mistake. And so they're saying, look, here's Devin fixing somebody else's mistake, as if the customer had made a screw up here and Devin is stepping in to fix these silly humans' errors. But that's not really what happened. And, you know, I think it takes somebody like you with a technical background like yours to expose that. I mean, I've long suspected things like this were going on just because the way these guys don their black turtlenecks or their motorcycle jackets and build these rock star personas. You kind of suspect that there's a little snake oil here, but I don't know enough about snakes to spot their oil. You actually went under the hood and realized this code is looking for a file that doesn't exist. It invented this code name out of thin air. I don't know, probably because of some legacy in the training data that it used. So it was a mistake that a human programmer would never have made in the first place, and therefore fixing the mistake shouldn't really be a selling point.
Right.
And I think that's probably why that video blew up, because you took the time to expose that, and it was really a pretty profound revelation. So,
yeah. The other thing, and I think you guys have this problem too, I've seen some of your videos talking about this kind of thing, is journalists these days have this really bad tendency to see a headline about something or see a headline in a press release about something, and then they extrapolate from there, write an article that's completely uncritical of it. And then the people that are trying to do due diligence and they're trying to invest and they're trying to decide what is or is not going to be true, read this article from the journalist and go, oh, okay, well, obviously this is all going to be a thing. When in fact, the journalist embellished what the press release said, and the press release was far beyond what the actual reality was.
Yeah, and there was just an article in the Atlantic yesterday. I think we're witnessing in real time that is finally starting to change, because there was an article in the Atlantic. Charlie Warzel wrote this article just yesterday about Sam Altman and Arianna Huffington's new medical chatbot. And he set out to make this article about how this medical chatbot is going to be so amazing and grandiose, and yet the article took a very dark turn very quickly. In the first sentence, I'm going to read this to you here. This just came out yesterday. An important thing to realize about the grandest conversations surrounding AI is that most of the time, everyone is making things up. And this is an article about Sam Altman, who is really the godfather of this whole $7 trillion stock market bubble that has been created here. most of the time they're just making things up. That's pretty wild. So I think the journalists are maybe very slowly starting to come around to the fact that they've played a role in this hype and they're starting to backwalk that.
I hope so. I mean, there are certain journalists, I can think of a couple that I'm not going to name, that trade on access to CEOs and that kind of thing, who I think are afraid to be honest and afraid to talk specifically about some of the snake oil for fear of not being able to get exclusive interviews anymore with some of these, rock star CEOs.
Yeah. Ethics are a problem. And, The Big Short is a very popular movie in financial YouTube circles. And there's a scene in The Big Short where the Wall Street Journal reporter is afraid of covering this story of everything going on in mortgage finance because he didn't want to lose access to the finance firms. I mean, it's a real ethical problem that a lot of journalists, unfortunately, fail that test. So that's another really good point. Now, you did another video, and this was actually the first video of yours that I saw that the algorithm fed to me. It said, AI hype is completely out of control, especially since ChatGPT 4.0 came out. And there's a section in there that it was pretty awkward. I found myself watching this video and I am clapping and cheering out loud, and it was awkward as all get out because I was by myself in my office. But there's a scene where you're talking about the history of demos in Silicon Valley and what they've done with demos. I mean, could you take us a little bit down memory lane? There's this one scene where these headlines are just slowly covering your face, and it's really hilarious. Very well done. Go ahead. I mean, So going back to the whole journalist wanting access thing. So that video was actually prompted by an article in Wired, not Wired magazine anymore, but Wired's website, by someone who basically said, it's time to believe the AI hype. And in that article, there was a line that said the demos don't lie. And I read that and was like, they lie all the time. And so I went back to, so there was so it started with, from a time standpoint, the AI part. Last year or year before, there was a lawsuit about someone who was killed in a Tesla. And on the stand, one of the Tesla engineers had to admit that they had faked a Tesla self-driving demo from like 2016 or something like that. So it started a long time ago. There was Tesla. Wow.
Yes. So, and the Tesla self-driving AI stuff, remember, I don't know if you remember a few years ago, but everybody was saying, taxi drivers are going to be out of work. The long haul truckers are all going to be out of work. None of that's happened. The taxi drivers are mostly out of work, but it's because of Uber. It's not because of self-driving cars. But it's just more Silicon Valley hype stuff. In 2018, I think, Google had a demo where their AI called up a restaurant or a hair salon. I think it called both anyway. And that demo turned out to be heavily edited after the fact. And some reporters went and found the actual hair salon that got called, or the restaurant, or both, and figured out, okay, so that's not really what happened on the phone call. And then last year, it turned out that one of the coolest parts of one of the demos that Google did for its latest AI project was also done and then chopped up and then edited and put back together. There was a video AI video generator thing called Sora that OpenAI has done. And they put out a video and they said, this video was done by some people named Shy Kids. So the Shy Kids are actually an FX firm. And we were like, cool. So the FX firm can use the video AI tool. Well, it turns out that using the video AI tool meant 2 weeks of using conventional FX techniques and rotoscoping and chopping out backgrounds and putting in other backgrounds. It took an entire studio 2 weeks, or between a week and 2 weeks, to take the footage that came out of the AI and turn it into something that they could release on the internet. But that didn't get disclosed until long after the video hit, and everybody was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And people started writing articles about how Hollywood was going to be dead in 2 years. And so it's like, okay, so here's the retraction, or maybe not retraction, but here's the article that explains what the real truth was. A month after all of the hype has hit, and the people that cover the big hype don't bother to go back and say, oh, by the way, that article that we wrote about how Hollywood's going to go away, that was based on this thing, but there's new information and we're going to tell you about the new information. Yeah, they never do that.
And I can tell you, Carl, every time one of these demos comes out, the stocks rocket. They go higher every time. And because there's no hype around the retraction, the stock never corrects back lower when it's exposed that it was basically a lie or fake, at best, a half truth.
Right.
And look at some of the names there. Tesla, Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, that's their Microsoft name, Cognition Labs, some of the biggest names in AI. And there is a well-documented history of them faking their AI demos and using that lie to solicit money, investment capital. And this does not get covered. I mean, we're just now starting to see it. I was very surprised to see it with that quote in the Atlantic yesterday about how most of the time they're just making it up. So the people at Cognition Labs put out that video about Devin claiming it was out there on the internet doing UpWork jobs as a side hustle and making money. And Carl went and double-checked their work and found out that at best, that was a half-truth, and at worst, an outright lie. It wasn't really doing what they were saying it was doing. And remember, they used that as material to go out and solicit a $2 billion valuation from investors. And it turns out this is just another in a long line of outright fake demos that big tech has put out about their AI products over the last few years. And you have to wonder, if AI is so revolutionary and so groundbreaking, why do they feel compelled to keep lying about what it can do? Folks, that was just part one of my interview series with Carl from the Internet of Bugs. There's 2 more segments coming out over the next few days, so I highly recommend you check those out. Also, check out the links down below to Carl's videos and subscribe to his channel. Tell him nobody sent you. And until next time, live small and dream big.